that actually ties into one of the big themes of the movie. Jonathan, you mentioned some, and I've got others, and that is, I think it's about civilization itself, where they have this debate, right, about a third of the way into the movie about whether or not humanity is fundamentally good or bad. And I think they're all wrong. And I think the movie shows that they're all wrong, because what humans are actually good at is surviving and forming groups until we're strong enough to take on whatever threatens us, right? And we see this happening in the movie, right? We see this happening, like in the very beginning, you have a very high level of organization, right? Like you have a conflict between David and Brent, the neighbor, where they're like Brent's tree damaged, I think, David's car or something, or his house or something. And they have a conflict, and Brent has been a jerk in the past, but it's a resolved conflict because they both have insurance and there's courts of law and all of that, right? So they don't have to deal with each other, right? And then you also have like the military base and everything. And that is all taken away when the mist comes, and it's just people trying to survive. And they immediately start forming groups, right? This little clique around David forms, and then the fanatics forms, and then there's divisions between locals and visitors, like groups immediately form, right? And they basically try to get people to survive and try to provide a path forward, right? And then in the end, you have the biggest level where the military comes and just wipes out all the monsters, which is, again, people coming together and working towards a common goal, right? So this entire movie, and this works on level, like this works on the level of families, this works on the level of locals versus visitors, this works on the level of, you've got the army guys, you've got the fanatics, you've got the reasonable people. There's all these groups forming, and they all kind of are based around the idea of we're helping each other survive, right? But only people inside the group. And I think where I said earlier that I didn't like Mrs. Carmody until I realized that this was what the movie was about. Because what she is basically is she's a leader without a solution. Because like unless you believe that her prophecies are actually real, which I don't personally, I think she's just somebody who's looking for a solution, and her faith gives her the appearance of a solution, but she can't actually help anybody. And I think it's ambiguous whether that's actually true, but that's how I interpret it, right? But the cult does not help anybody, right? It does not organize first aid, it does not organize food, it does not organize a night's watch. It just tries to find somebody to blame. And it tries to get people to surrender kind of their self for the group, because that's the only solution forward. And that's reflected in Jim, the mechanic, right? Who initially says it's all bunk. And then when he survives a monster attack, he converts immediately and is the most enthusiastic when it comes to finding somebody to sacrifice, right? So he's just cracked at that point and has given up his personality completely in order to pledge onto any promise of a solution, but it's an empty one, because in the end, the cult does not actually offer a solution. And I think that runs through the entire movie, and it's kind of, you've got these overlapping groups, and it's all about what group do you belong to, and what does the group do for you, and what do you do for the group, and how does that increase or decrease your chances of survival based on whether or not the group advocates good solutions or bad solutions and stuff like that. I think that's essentially just all of human society and history kind of playing out in this small group. So like the whole thing about the people trapped in the supermarket, it's kind of an allegory for humanity trying to find its way through the world, right?
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Lord of the Flies, if anyone's ever read that book before.
Not read it, but I know about it.
Yeah, but like these like bunch of kids, again, like kind of like stuck on the island, and then obviously like you then kind of see how things start to play out. People like they start to like kind of like cannibalize each other, and like you mentioned about like the different like groups forming and whatnot, and to know the fallout from it. So I can see. I wasn't like kind of like actively thinking about that like during the movie, but like now that you're saying it, I'm kind of like rethinking about it, and rethinking like the priestess and like her not having really any answers to it. It was just like
all she does is offer somebody to blame, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, that kind of like idea of hope, or sort of like a false hope in this sense,